Sick millionaire shocked to see his ex's surgeon, she became his only chance. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. Alexander Morgan adjusted his Italian silk tie while observing New York City through the windows of the 50th floor. From the top of his glass and steel tower, the empire he had built seemed even more impressive. Biotech Solutions wasn't just another technology company. It was the largest biotechnology company in North America, with branches on 3 continents, and a market value in the billions. His fingers drummed on the black marble desk as he analyzed the latest financial reports. The shares had risen 15% just that week after the announcement of the new human life extension project. The press called him the man who defied time, and he secretly took pride in the title. A sudden tremor in his right hand interrupted his thoughts. It wasn't the first time this had happened in recent weeks. Alexander frowned, irritated by that display of weakness. At 45, he kept himself in impeccable shape. Gym every day, controlled diet, cutting-edge supplementation. His body was another company that he managed with mathematical precision. "Mr. Morgan, the board meeting will begin in 5 minutes, announced Jessica, his executive assistant for more than a decade, through the intercom. "I'm on my way," he replied, standing up. The tremor returned, stronger this time, accompanied by a sharp pain in his chest. Alexander leaned on the desk, breathing deeply. His legs weakened for a moment, but he refused to show any sign of fragility. He adjusted his custom-made Armani suit and headed to the meeting room. 12 executives awaited him, all wearing dark suits like corporate uniforms. Alexander took his place at the head of the table, ignoring the cold sweat that was beginning to form on his forehead. "Gentlemen, let's start with the presentation of Project Kronos," he said, his voice as firm as ever. On the giant screen behind him, graphs and projections began to appear. "The neural implant we've developed isn't just a technological advancement, it's a revolution in human history. For the first time, we'll be able to significantly increase human cognitive capacity," and the words got stuck in his throat. The room began to spin. Alexander tried to support himself on the table, but his arms didn't respond. The last thing he saw before collapsing was Jessica's frightened face running toward him. He woke up in a hospital bed, surrounded by state-of-the-art equipment, ironically, many of them developed by his own company. The room was a presidential suite at St. Luke's Hospital, the most advanced in the country. The white walls and the smell of antiseptic deeply bothered him. "Mr. Morgan, good to see you're awake," said a nurse, adjusting the cardiac monitor. "The doctor responsible for your case is already on her way." Alexander tried to sit up, but his body protested. He closed his eyes, trying to organize his thoughts. In all his years of life, he had never felt so vulnerable. Control, his trademark, was slipping through his fingers like water. Firm footsteps in the hallway announced the arrival of the doctor. The door opened and time stopped. There, standing in the doorway, was Emily Hayes. 15 years had passed, but he would recognize her anywhere. The same determined look, the dark hair now with some silver strands, the posture that had always impressed him. Their eyes met, and 15 years of silence weighed between them. Emily maintained her professional expression, but Alexander knew every micro-expression of that face. He saw the shock, the hesitation, and something else, an old hurt that time had not been able to erase. "Mr. Morgan," she said, her voice controlled. "I'm Dr. Emily Hayes, head of the neurology department. We'll need to do some tests to understand what caused your blackout." Alexander felt his heart accelerate, and the cardiac monitor betrayed his agitation. Emily glanced quickly at the device, and for a moment, her professional mask faltered. "Dr. Hayes," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "How long has it been?" "The tests will begin in an hour," she interrupted, making notes on her clipboard. "Please rest until then." Before he could say anything else, Emily left the room, leaving only the echo of her footsteps and an avalanche of memories that Alexander had spent 15 years trying to bury. The tremor in his hand returned, stronger than ever, and for the first time in a long time, he felt afraid. Emily closed the door of her office and fell into her chair. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened Alexander Morgan's medical file. The preliminary results were concerning: significant alterations in the central nervous system, cardiac arrhythmia, progressive muscle fatigue. The picture suggested something much more serious than stress or overwork. "Doctor." "Emily," called Dr. Richard Taylor, her department colleague and partner for 3 years. "Is everything all right? You look pale." She forced a smile. "I'm fine, Richard. Just a complicated case." Richard approached and placed his hands on her shoulders, gently massaging. "The CEO of biotech? I heard he fainted during a meeting." Emily nodded, trying to ignore the knot in her throat. How to explain that the patient in room 501 wasn't just another case? How to say that? 15 years ago she had planned an entire life by his side. "I need to request some more tests," she said, standing up. "There's something strange about this case." "Want me to take over?" offered Richard. "You seem really shaken." "No," she replied, perhaps too quickly. "It's my responsibility as head of the department." Emily walked to the window, observing the city that stretched beyond the hospital. Somewhere out there was the Biotech Solutions building, that glass tower that she had avoided looking at for so many years. How many times had she imagined this moment? The reunion she never planned, with the man who had broken her heart into 1,000 pieces. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was her secretary, Mary. "Doctor, there's a young woman wanting to speak with you. She says she has a medical innovation project to present." Emily checked her watch. "Not today, Mary. I have an urgent case and—" "She insists it's important," interrupted Mary. "Said it's about a low-cost cardiac monitor for underserved communities." Something about the young woman's insistence aroused Emily's curiosity. "All right, ask her to wait 15 minutes. When—" The secretary left. Richard approached again. "You don't need to carry the world on your shoulders, Emily. Let me help with some cases." She smiled, genuinely this time. Richard was a good man, stable, caring, present, the opposite of Alexander. With him, there were no surprises, no nights spent awake waiting for calls that never came, no broken promises. "Thank you, love," she said, kissing him softly. "But I need to do this." After Richard left, Emily opened a locked drawer in her desk. There, hidden under old papers, was a silver necklace with a small heart-shaped pendant, the last physical reminder she kept of Alexander. The intercom rang, bringing her back to reality. "Doctor, Miss Laura is here. You can send her." "Take." The door opened and Emily felt the air escape from her lungs. The young woman who entered had the same eyes as Alexander, that unique shade of brown with small golden specks, the same determined smile, the same elegant posture. "Good afternoon, Dr. Emily," said the young woman, extending her hand. "I'm Laura Hayes." The world stopped for a moment. Emily looked at the young woman in front of her, 20 years old perhaps, the same age she was when— "Hayes?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes," answered Laura, her eyes fixed on Emily's. "I'm your daughter. And his too." The necklace in the drawer seemed to weigh a ton. Emily sat down, her legs no longer supporting her weight. All the walls she had built over the years, all the strength she had accumulated, all the professionalism that defined her, everything crumbled before those so familiar eyes. How did you know?" was all she managed to ask. "I always knew," Laura replied, her voice soft but firm. "I followed his career from a distance, every achievement, every headline, but I only decided to approach now when I found out what's happening to him." Emily felt a tear roll down her face. Her daughter, their daughter, was there in front of her, no longer a kept secret but a strong and determined woman. And now fate had conspired to bring them all together again, in the most unexpected way possible. The silence in Emily's office was dense, almost palpable. Laura remained standing, her hands holding a folder with her project, while Emily tried to process the avalanche of emotions that invaded her. 20 years of secrets were emerging to the surface like bubbles in boiling water. "Why now?" Emily finally managed to ask, her voice a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Laura approached, placing the folder on the desk. "Because what's happening to him isn't normal, Mum, and I think I know why." Emily frowned, her medical mind immediately alert. "What do you mean?" 3 years ago, while doing my research at medical school, I found documents about Project Kronos," Laura explained, opening the folder and revealing a series of graphs and reports. "The neural chip that he tested on himself during the experimental phase." Emily felt her heart race. She remembered that time perfectly. It was when everything began to crumble. Alexander had become obsessive with the project, spending sleepless nights immersed in research and tests. The chip promised to revolutionize human brain performance, but the safety protocols seemed to have been run over by haste. "The symptoms he's presenting," continued Laura, "are consistent with a systemic failure caused by the implant. And it's not just that." She hesitated for a moment, her fingers unconsciously touching a necklace on her neck. The same, one that Emily immediately recognized. "That necklace," murmured Emily. "You gave it to me when I was 15, Laura smiled sadly. "You said it was special, but you never explained why. Now I know. He gave an identical one to you, didn't he?" Emily opened the drawer of her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she removed the identical necklace. "On our last night together, before he left for abroad." The moment was interrupted by an urgent knock on the door. Richard entered, his normally calm face showing concern. "Emily, we need you. The patient in 501 is having a crisis." Emily rose in a rush, her professional mode automatically overriding her emotions. "Laura, we need to continue this conversation later." "I'm coming with you," said Laura, determined. "He needs to know the truth. About everything." They ran, through the hospital corridors, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the white walls. When they reached the room, they found Alexander conscious but visibly disturbed. His body was shaking, and the cardiac monitor showed concerning alterations, in rhythm. "Dr. Hayes," he said between labored breaths, "something's wrong. My body, I can't control it." Emily immediately began the examination, her experienced hands checking his vital signs. Richard was preparing emergency medication while Laura observed from the door, her heart torn between fear and the need to reveal the truth. "Mr. Morgan," Emily kept her voice professional, "I need you to focus on my voice. Your blood pressure is very high, and your heart rhythm is irregular." "Emily," he whispered, using her first name for the first time since their reunion. "Why did you never tell me?" She froze, realizing that his gaze was fixed on Laura. Even in the midst of the crisis, even after so many years, his brilliant mind had made the connection. The same eyes, the same bearing, the necklace. "This isn't the time for that." Emily tried to deflect, but Alexander grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "I have a daughter." His voice was a mix of accusation and plea. "All this time." "Why?" Laura stepped forward, no longer able to contain herself. "Because your letters never reached her. Because your calls were blocked. Because someone in your company decided that a family would be a risk to the business." The cardiac monitor began to beep more intensely. Richard moved quickly with the syringe, but Alexander raised his hand, stopping him. "Wait," he gasped, his eyes never leaving Laura's face. "I need to know, I need to understand." "Later," Emily intervened firmly. "Now you need to calm down and let us help you. Laura isn't going anywhere, I promise." For a moment, it seemed that Alexander would protest, but then his body relaxed. Slightly. He allowed Richard to administer the medication, his eyes still fixed on Laura as if he feared she would disappear if he blinked. "The necklace," he murmured, already feeling the effects of the sedative. "I gave an identical one to your mother." "I know, Dad," Laura answered softly, tears streaming down her face. "I always knew." The words hung in the air like a dense mist, laden with 2 decades of secrets and longing. Emily checked the monitors, noting that the vital signs were beginning to stabilize. Richard made some notes on the chart, casting concerned glances at Emily. The sedative began to take effect, and Alexander's eyes slowly closed. Before falling completely asleep, he whispered, "My daughter, All this time. My daughter. In Sedum, the doctor's break room, Emily served 3 cups of coffee. Her hands were still trembling slightly as she passed one to Richard and another to Laura. The strong aroma filled the room, but it wasn't enough to dispel the tension hanging in the air. So, Richard broke the silence, his tone carefully neutral. So you're his daughter? It wasn't a question. Laura nodded, her fingers playing with the necklace, a gesture that Emily noticed was identical to what Alexander did when he was nervous. We need to talk about Project Kronos, Laura said, pulling out her folder. His symptoms are getting worse, and it's not a coincidence. Emily sat down, feeling the weight of 2 decades of decisions and consequences on her shoulders. Richard, can you give us a moment? He hesitated, his eyes revealing a mixture of concern and something else, jealousy perhaps. After all, in a matter of hours, the past that Emily had tried so hard to bury had resurfaced with full force. Of course, he finally replied, leaning in to kiss her forehead. I'll be in the emergency room if you need me. When the door closed, Laura spread a series of documents on the table. 3 years ago, during my internship at a medical school, I had access to confidential reports about the neural chip's development. The initial tests showed warning signs that were ignored. Emily examined the papers, her heart tightening as she recognized Alexander's handwriting in some marginal notes. He was always obstinate when he believed in something. The chip was designed to increase cognitive performance, Laura continued, but the first volunteers began to show side effects after a few months. Tremors, memory lapses, cardiac arrhythmia. Exactly what your father is presenting now, Emily completed, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together. But there's more, Laura hesitated, pulling a yellowed envelope from her bag. I found these letters in the company's old archives. They were never sent. Emily took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of letters, all with her familiar handwriting on the envelope. Letters she had written to Alexander 15 years ago, telling him about the pregnancy, begging him to get in touch. How? Her voice failed. Jessica Davis, Laura explained, a touch of bitterness in her voice, his executive assistant. She intercepted all communication, convinced that a child would harm the company's international expansion. I found a memo from her explaining how she protected the company's interests. Emily felt a wave of anger so intense that she needed to stand up, walking to the window to try to calm herself. 15 years of hurt, of sleepless nights wondering why he never responded, why he never cared. You knew this all along? She asked Laura. I discovered it 3 years ago, she answered, but it wasn't the right time to confront him. So I focused on studying medicine, on understanding Project Kronos, on preparing for this moment. And your project? The cardiac monitor for underserved communities? A small smile lit up Laura's face. It's real. I spent the last 2 years developing it. I wanted to prove that technology can be used to help people, not just generate profits. Emily sat down again, observing her daughter with a mixture of pride and admiration. Laura had inherited Alexander's brilliance and her own compassion, a combination that could change the world. He's going to need a transplant, Emily said softly. The damage to his heart is too extensive. I know, Laura replied, and there's one more thing you need to know. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a small scar on her wrist. During my research, I also tested a version of the chip, and I'm starting to show the same symptoms. The world seemed to stop. Emily felt as if all the air had been sucked from the room. Her daughter, the girl she raised alone, whom she protected with all her strength, now faced the same uncertain fate as Alexander. Why? Was all she could ask. Because I needed to understand, Laura replied simply. I needed to know exactly what was happening to him, and now, perhaps, we can find a solution together. The intercom in the room interrupted the conversation. Doctor, Emily, Mr. Morgan is waking up and is asking to see you both. Mother and daughter looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. The moment of truth had arrived, not just about the past, but about the future they might still build together, if there was time. Room 501 was silent when Emily and Laura entered, Alexander was sitting on the bed, his gaze lost in the urban landscape beyond the window. Hearing their footsteps, he turned slowly. His eyes, always so confident and determined, now revealed a vulnerability that Emily had never seen before. "So it wasn't a dream," he said softly, his gaze fixed on Laura. "You really are my daughter." Laura approached the bed, her steps hesitant but determined. "Yes, I am, and we have a lot to talk about." Emily remained near the door, her emotions in conflict. As a doctor, she knew she should limit strong emotions. At that moment, as a woman, she wanted to scream, demand explanations, release 15 years of pent-up pain. But as a mother, she knew this moment belonged to Laura. "Why did you never look for me before?" Alexander asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Because I needed to be ready," Laura replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I needed to understand who I was, who you were, and most importantly, what really happened." Alexander frowned. "What do you mean?" Laura opened her folder, removing the old letters. "These are all the letters that Mum sent you 15 years ago. Letters that were intercepted and never reached you." Alexander's face paled as he recognized Emily's handwriting on the envelopes. With trembling hands, he took one of the letters and began to read. His expression changed with each line: shock, pain, anger, regret. "Emily," he whispered, looking at his ex-girlfriend with tearful eyes. "You tried to tell me. All this time, you tried." "Jessica," Emily finally spoke, her voice controlled, "your executive assistant decided that a family would be an impediment to your international expansion plans." Alexander closed his eyes, his hands clutching the paper tightly. "I trusted her, gave her total control over my correspondence, my calls. She told me you had moved on, that you didn't want any more contact. And you believed so easily." Emily couldn't contain the bitterness in her voice. "No," he replied, opening his eyes. "I didn't believe it, but I was so obsessive with Project Kronos, so determined to prove that I could revolutionize medicine. I convinced myself it was better that way, that you deserved someone more present, more stable." "And what about me?" Laura interrupted. "Didn't I deserve to know my father?" Alexander looked at his daughter, really looked, as if trying to memorize every detail of her face. "You're beautiful," he said softly. "You have your mother's eyes, and my smile." "And your genius for technology," Emily added, a small smile appearing on her lips. "She developed a revolutionary cardiac monitor for underserved communities." Pride shone in Alexander's eyes, quickly replaced by concern. "Laura, about Project Kronos." "I know," she interrupted him. "I know everything about the neural chip. In fact—" She hesitated, looking at Emily for support. "Tell him," Emily gently encouraged. "I also tested a version of the chip," Laura revealed, showing the scar on her wrist, "during my research at college, and I'm beginning to show the same symptoms as you." The cardiac monitor began to beep more rapidly. Alexander tried to sit up, his face contorted in panic. "No, no, 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 you can't." "Alexander, calm down." Emily approached quickly, checking his vital signs. "How could I let this happen?" he murmured, tears streaming down his face. "First I abandoned my daughter before even knowing her, and now she's suffering because of my obsession with technology." Laura grabbed his hand, squeezing it tightly. "It's not your fault. I made my choice, and now we can face this together." "But there's no cure," Alexander said, defeated. "The damage is irreversible." "Maybe not," Laura replied, a determined gleam in her eyes. "My project isn't just a cardiac monitor. It's a complete neural regeneration system using nanotechnology, and I think it can be adapted to reverse the damage caused by the chip." Emily and Alexander looked at her in surprise. Laura opened her folder again, revealing a series of complex diagrams and calculations. "You developed this alone?" Alexander asked, impressed. "Yes," Laura smiled. "Let's say I inherited the obstinacy of both my parents." At that moment, something changed in the room. The atmosphere of sadness and recrimination was replaced by something new: hope. A family, torn apart by secrets and ambition, was now reuniting, united by a common purpose: to survive. Richard observed through the window of his office as Emily explained Laura's project to the medical team. His heart ached as he saw the gleam in her eyes, a gleam he hadn't seen in a long time. Laura's arrival and Alexander's reappearance had awakened something in Emily that he had struggled for years to reach. "The proposed nanotechnology system is revolutionary," Emily explained, her enthusiasm evident. "If it works, it will not only be able to reverse the damage caused by the neural chip, but also open new possibilities for cardiac treatments in general." "And it was developed by a medical student?" questioned Dr. Marcus, the chief cardiologist, clearly skeptical. "Laura is no ordinary student," Emily replied, maternal pride in her voice. "She has a deep knowledge of biotechnology and programming. Besides, she's Alexander Morgan's daughter," Richard completed, his voice more bitter than he intended. A heavy silence fell over the room. The medical team exchanged surprised looks. Emily's past relationship with the famous biotech CEO wasn't exactly a secret, but the existence of a daughter was a shocking revelation. "Yes," Emily confirmed, lifting her chin. "And that doesn't diminish the merit of her work in any way. In fact, it only reinforces the urgency of implementing the project." "Emily," Richard intervened, trying to keep his voice professional, "don't you think you're too emotionally involved to lead this case?" Her eyes met his, a mixture of hurt and determination in her gaze. "Maybe I am, but I'm also the most qualified person in this hospital to understand both the technology and the medical aspects involved." Before the discussion could continue, the door opened abruptly. It was Laura, her face pale and frightened. "Mom," she gasped. "It's Dad. He's having another crisis." Emily rushed out of the room, followed by the entire medical team. Richard hesitated for a moment before following them. In the corridor, they found Jessica, Alexander's assistant, arguing heatedly with the security guards. "I need to see him," she insisted. "I have important information about Project Kronos." Laura stopped abruptly upon hearing that voice. Turning slowly, she faced the woman who had kept her father away from her for so many years. "You," Laura said, her voice trembling with contained anger. "You have no right to be here anymore." Jessica paled upon seeing Laura, immediate recognition in her eyes. You are the daughter you helped hide," Laura completed. "The one you decided didn't deserve to know her own father." Emily touched Laura's arm gently. "Not now, honey. Your father needs us." But Jessica took a step forward, her face a mask of regret. "You don't understand. The chip. There's something you need to know." "What could be more important than 15 years of lies?" Laura asked bitterly. "The antidote," Jessica replied, her voice almost a whisper. "There is an antidote." The corridor fell into absolute silence. Emily felt her heart race, while Laura grabbed her arm tightly. "What are you talking about?" Emily demanded. "It was developed as a precaution in the early stages of the project," Jessica explained quickly. "Her sequence of nanoparticles programmed to neutralize the chip in case of emergency. But Alexander never knew. The board decided that knowledge of its existence might make him hesitate to proceed with the tests." Laura felt her legs weaken. All her work developing a treatment, and the cure had existed all along, hidden in biotech's archives. "Where is it?" Emily asked, her voice sharp as steel. "In the company's main vault," Jessica replied. "But it requires 3 board authorizations to be accessed." A cry of pain from Alexander's room interrupted the conversation. Emily and Laura rushed inside, leaving Richard to deal with Jessica. In the room, Alexander was convulsing on the bed, his eyes rolling back. The cardiac monitor emitted frantic alerts. "Dad!" Laura shouted, running to his side. Emily immediately began emergency procedures, her mind working frantically. They had to stabilize him, and fast. But now, with the revelation of the antidote, a new race against time began. "Laura," Emily called as she worked, "we need that antidote, and we're going to need help to get it." Laura nodded, determination replacing fear in her eyes. As the medical team struggled to stabilize Alexander, She was already formulating a plan. The biotech board had hidden the truth for too long. It was time to confront them, not just for her father, but for herself. The Biotech Solutions Board met in an emergency session in the main room on the 50th floor. The atmosphere was tense, with whispered conversations and apprehensive looks being exchanged among the executives. At the head of the table, normally occupied by Alexander, sat Victor Reynolds, the Vice President of Operations. "Gentlemen," Victor began, his deep voice echoing through the room, "the situation is delicate. Alexander's hospitalization and the rumors about Project Kronos threaten not only our financial stability, but the entire company's reputation. And now we have to deal with this supposed daughter," added Margaret Chen, the financial director, shuffling some papers in front of her. "The stock has already fallen 5% since the news leaked." "The problem isn't the daughter," interrupted Charles Winters, Director of Research and Development. "The problem is that she discovered the antidote. Jessica just informed me that she revealed its existence." A murmur of concern ran through the room. The antidote was one of the company's best-kept secrets, known only to a select group on the board. "How did she find out?" questioned Victor, his face red with anger. "The girl is brilliant," replied Charles, a touch of admiration in his voice. "She developed a similar project, although less refined. She must have found clues in the archives during her research." The hospital, while the board discussed their future, Laura worked frantically on her laptop, sitting beside Alexander's bed. Her father had been stabilized but remained unconscious. Emily alternated between checking vital signs and helping her daughter with her research. "I found something," Laura said suddenly, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "The access records to the main vault show an interesting pattern. Every 3 months, exactly at midnight, someone accesses the restricted area." "Maintenance," suggested Emily, leaning in to see the screen. "No," Laura smiled, a gleam of triumph in her eyes. "It's when they check the antidote. It needs to be kept under specific temperature and pressure conditions. And the next access is scheduled for tonight," completed a voice from the door. Both turned, surprised. Jessica was standing at the entrance, holding a folder and an access card. "Why are you helping us now?" Laura asked, suspicious. Jessica entered the room, gently closing the door behind her. "Because I spent 15 years watching your father build an empire at the expense of his humanity. When I intercepted those letters, I thought I was protecting the company, but in reality, I was destroying a family." She placed the folder on the table. "Here's everything you need to know about the antidote and the security protocols. And this," she raised the access card, "is my authorization as executive secretary. You'll still need 2 more board authorizations." Emily took the folder, quickly leafing through its contents. "How will we get the other authorizations?" "Charles Winters," replied Jessica. "He was always against hiding the antidote. And as for the third," she hesitated, "Victor Reynolds never leaves his access card, except when he goes to the company gym every Wednesday night." "Today is Wednesday," Laura observed, a plan beginning to form in her mind. At this moment, Alexander moved in the bed, moaning softly. Emily immediately checked his vital signs, her expression worried. "He's getting worse," she said, adjusting the drip of the IV. "His heart rate is becoming increasingly irregular, and the tremors are intensifying." Laura looked at her father, then at the laptop showing the vault access times. She made a decision. "Mom, I need you to keep Dad stable for a few more hours," she said, standing up. "Jessica, can you set up a meeting with Charles Winters now?" Jessica nodded, already picking up her phone. "He owes me a few favors." "Laura," Emily called, concern in her voice, "what are you planning?" Laura touched the necklace on her neck, the same one her father had given to her mother so many years ago. "I'm going to do what should have been done a long time ago. Fight for our family." In the boardroom, Victor Reynolds continued his meeting, unaware that his carefully constructed empire was about to crumble. In a few hours, his meticulous schedule would take him to the company gym, where his access card would be kept in a seemingly secure locker. And Laura, daughter of the man he had helped manipulate for so long, was about to prove that she had inherited more than just her father's eyes and smile. She had also inherited his unwavering determination to change the world. Charles Winter's office was located on the 48th floor of Biotech, with a panoramic view of the city that was beginning to light up with the twilight. Laura sat before him, her hands discreetly clutching the folder Jessica had provided. "So you're Alexander's daughter," Charles said, studying her with interest. "I must say, your cardiac monitor project is impressive, especially the part about neural regeneration." "Thank you," Laura replied, keeping her voice firm, "but I'm not here to talk about my project." Charles leaned forward, his astute eyes fixed on her. "The antidote? You knew all along. It wasn't a question." "Yes," he sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I was against hiding it from Alexander, but the board. They believed that knowledge of its existence would compromise the project's development. And now, my father is dying because of that decision," Laura said, her voice trembling slightly. "And so am I." Charles paled. You tested the chip." Laura showed the scar on her wrist. "I needed to understand, and now I understand all too well." A heavy silence fell over the office. Charles stood up, walking to the window. The setting sun tinged the sky red, like an omen. "You know we need 3 authorizations," he finally said. "I have Jessica's," Laura replied, "and I know Victor goes to the gym tonight." Charles turned abruptly. "It's very risky. Riskier than letting people die because of corporate pride." Her words hit Charles like a punch. He returned to his desk, opening a drawer and removing his access card. "You have 15 minutes, he said, handing her the card. "That's how long Victor spends in the locker room before working out." At the hospital, Emily monitored Alexander's vital signs with growing concern. Richard entered the room carrying some test results. "The latest results aren't good," he said softly. "The neural damage is spreading faster than predicted." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 2 decades of decisions not taken. "Will he be able to hold on until midnight?" "Emily," Richard touched her arm gently, "do you really believe this antidote story?" "I have to believe," she replied, looking at Alexander. "I can't lose him again. I can't lose our daughter." Richard felt his heart tighten. Emily's love for Alexander had never really died. It had only been dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. At the biotech gym, Laura waited in the hallway, her heart beating strongly. Jessica had secured a visitor badge for her, claiming a meeting about her project. Through the glass, she saw Victor Reynolds enter the men's locker room. 15 minutes. That was all the time she had. She waited 2 minutes and then entered the women's locker room, which shared a wall with the men's. Following Jessica's instructions, she located the ventilation duct that connected the 2 spaces. The sound of the shower started in the adjacent locker room. Laura took a deep breath and began to unscrew the vent grate, her hands trembling slightly. It wasn't just nervousness. The symptoms were getting worse. With the grate removed, she slid through the narrow duct, grateful for her slender build. On the other side, the men's locker room was empty, except for the sound of the shower. Victor's locker was locked, but Laura wasn't just a medical student. She was the daughter of a technology genius. Using a small device she had created especially for this occasion, she managed to open the locker in seconds. The access card was in the inner pocket of Victor's jacket. When she returned to the women's locker room, her legs were trembling violently. She leaned against the wall, trying to control her breathing. She couldn't fail now, not when she was so close. Her phone vibrated. A message from Emily. "Honey, come quickly. Your father is having another crisis." Laura tucked the card away with the other 2 and ran for the elevator. On the way, her fingers found the necklace on her neck, the symbol of a family that refused to be destroyed by corporate secrets and excessive ambition. As the elevator descended, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. The same determined eyes of Alexander Morgan stared back. In a few hours, the vault would be opened. In a few hours, her family's fate would be decided. And this time, no board, no security protocol, No corporate empire could prevent her from saving the people she loved. The hospital was strangely quiet when Laura returned. In room 501, the scene she found made her heart tighten. Alexander was conscious but visibly debilitated, while Emily adjusted a new medication in the IV. "Laura," Alexander called, his voice weak but determined. "Come here." She approached the bed, sitting on the edge. Her father took her hand, and she noticed how his fingers trembled. "You shouldn't have risked so much," he said, looking at the 3 access cards she pulled from her pocket. "How did you know?" A small smile appeared on his lips. "Because it's exactly what I would have done. You really are my daughter." Emily observed the interaction between father and daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. For a moment, she thought about how it would have been if they had had these moments throughout the last 20 years. How many smiles, how many discoveries, how many hugs lost in time. "Mr. Morgan," Jessica entered the room, her face tense. "The board discovered about the cards. Victor is on his way." Laura stood up quickly. "We need to go now. We still have 2 hours until midnight, but—" "No," Alexander interrupted her, trying to sit up. "It's too dangerous. Victor won't let this go unpunished." "Dad," Laura held his hand more tightly, "I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid of losing you, of losing the chance to really know you." The cardiac monitor registered a change in Alexander's rhythm. Emily approached, concerned, but he gestured for her to wait. "All these years," he continued. His voice choked. "I built an empire based on technology and innovation. I believed I was changing the world, making it better. But in the process, I lost the only thing that really mattered, my humanity." Silent tears streamed down Laura's face. Alexander extended his hand and touched the necklace on her neck. "I gave this necklace to your mother on our last night together," he said. "It was a promise that I would return, that we would build a life together. But I let ambition blind me." "There's still time," Laura whispered. A noise in the corridor interrupted the moment. Raised voices were approaching. Emily went to the door and came back quickly. "Victor is here with security," she informed. "They're searching all the rooms on the floor." Jessica stepped forward. "I can delay them, but you need to go now." Laura looked at her parents. "I can't leave him here." "Yes, you can," Alexander replied, his voice gaining strength. "And you must. You're stronger than I ever was, Laura. You have your mother's determination and my obstinacy. Use that." Emily picked up the access cards. "I'll go with you." "No," Laura and Alexander said at the same time. "He needs you here," Laura completed. "And I need to know that he's safe." Emily hesitated, torn between the need to protect her daughter and the duty to care for Alexander. Finally, she hugged Laura tightly. "Come back to us," she whispered in her ear. Jessica opened a side door that gave access to the service stairway. "Go, I'll take care of the rest." Laura kissed her father's forehead and hugged her mother one last time. Before leaving, she turned to Alexander. "Dad, thank you for giving me your smile." When she disappeared through the door, Alexander finally let the tears fall. Emily held his hand, and together they awaited the arrival of Victor Reynolds. In the corridor, Jessica took a deep breath and walked toward the security entourage. It was time to fix 15 years of mistakes. It was time to face Victor and the board. It was time for the truth to come out, no matter the cost. And as the sun set over New York, Laura Hayes ran against time, carrying with her not only 3 access cards, but the weight of 2 decades of secrets, the love of a reconstituted family, and the hope of a future that could still be rewritten. The vault awaited her, and with it perhaps the chance to save not only her father but also herself. The 50th floor of biotech was silent and dark when Laura arrived. Using Jessica's card, she accessed the restricted area without difficulty. Her heart beat strongly as she walked through the empty corridors, her footsteps echoing off the glass and steel walls. At the hospital, Victor Reynolds entered room 501 like a king in his territory, flanked by 2 security guards. His cold gaze scanned the environment, resting on Alexander. "Where is your daughter?" he asked without preamble. What daughter? Alexander replied, his voice weak but laden with irony. The one you helped hide from me for 20 years. Victor gave a humorless smile. Always dramatic, Alexander. You built this empire by sacrificing sentimentality. Don't come now playing the devoted father. Emily stepped forward, her eyes flashing. You have no right. Dr. Hayes, Victor interrupted her. I suggest you focus on your medical duties. Corporate matters are not your specialty. No, Jessica spoke from the door, her voice surprisingly firm. But they are mine, and I have evidence of all your manipulations, Victor. All the board decisions you influenced, all the documents you had me hide. In the company's main vault, Laura inserted the first access card. The electronic panel lit up green. 1 card down, 2 to go. Her hands were shaking, not just from nervousness, the symptoms were rapidly worsening. Back in the hospital room, Victor had lost some of his composure. You're bluffing, Jessica. I'm not, she replied, taking out her tablet. I sent copies of everything to several journalists. If anything happens to Laura, to Alexander, or to anyone involved in this story, the truth comes out. Alexander observed the scene with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Jessica, who for so long had been a pawn in the corporate power game, now revealed herself to be a much more astute player than anyone had imagined. Laura inserted the second card. Another green light. Her entire body was trembling now, and she had to lean against the wall for a moment. Through the window she could see the city lights twinkling like earthly stars. Somewhere down there, her parents were waiting for her. Don't you understand, Victor? Alexander spoke, his voice gaining strength. All this time we built an empire based on lies. We used technology to extend life, but we forgot to truly live it. Poetic, Victor scoffed, but that won't stop your precious daughter from being arrested for corporate theft. No, Emily intervened, but perhaps the dozens of criminal negligence. Lawsuits when the truth about Project Kronos comes out will make you think twice. The last card slid into the reader. Laura held her breath. The green light came on, and the vault door began to open with a soft pneumatic sound. Inside, in a small refrigerated chamber, was a vial containing a blue-silver liquid. The antidote. Laura took it carefully, her hands now violently trembling. When she turned to leave, her legs failed. She fell to her knees, the vial firmly secured against her chest. Her vision began to darken at the edges. Not now, she murmured to herself. Please, not now. At the hospital, the confrontation continued. You have 2 options, Victor, Jessica said. You can try to stop Laura and face the consequences of the truth coming out, or you can do the right thing for the first time in your career. Victor looked at each face in the room. Emily's determination, Jessica's defiant calm, Alexander's silent dignity. Something in his expression subtly changed. The board will demand explanations, he said finally. The board will get much more than explanations, Alexander replied. They'll get a lesson about the true meaning of innovation and humanity. Laura managed to stand up, leaning against the wall. The antidote vial was secure in her bag. Staggering, she made her way to the elevator. Each step was a battle against her own collapsing body. Hold on, she whispered, thinking of her father, of herself, of all the other people who might have been affected by the chip. I'm coming back. The sun had completely set now, and night embraced the city with its dark mantle. But for the Morgan Hayes family, a new dawn was about to rise. A dawn of truth, redemption, and most importantly, love. The taxi weaved through the Idicure streets of New York, taking Laura back to the hospital. Each red light seemed to last an eternity. She kept the antidote vial firmly secured against her chest, feeling her own heart beat irregularly. Can you go faster, please? She asked the driver, her voice betraying the urgency of the situation. At the hospital, Richard examined Alexander's latest tests, his expression increasingly concerned. The neurological damage was spreading rapidly, now affecting the respiratory control center. Emily, he called softly, not wanting to alarm Alexander, who was sleeping. We need to talk. She followed him to the corridor, leaving Jessica vigilant. In the room, Victor had left shortly before after a long conversation with Alexander that changed something fundamental in the company's power dynamic. "The tests are worse," Richard said bluntly. "I don't know if he'll hold up another hour without intervention." Emily leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Laura is on her way with the antidote." "And if it doesn't work?" Richard asked gently. "Emily, you need to prepare for the possibility—" "No," she interrupted him. "I won't lose hope. Not now that finally—" Her voice failed. Richard hugged her, feeling her body tremble with contained sobs. For a moment, she allowed herself to be just Emily, not the brilliant doctor, not the strong mother, just a woman facing the possibility of losing the man who, despite everything, she had never stopped loving. In the taxi, Laura struggled to maintain consciousness. The tremors had worsened, and her vision occasionally blurred. She took her phone from her pocket with difficulty, dialing Charles Winter's number. "Laura?" he answered on the first ring. "Did you get it?" "Yes," she replied, her voice weak. "I need you to contact the original project team. We need someone who knows exactly how to administer the antidote." "I'm already on my way to the hospital with Dr. Sarah Martinez. She led the antidote's development." Laura felt a wave of relief. "Charles, thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "We have a lot of work ahead." The taxi finally arrived at the hospital. Laura paid with trembling hands and got out, leaning on the car for a moment to regain her balance. The emergency room entrance seemed strangely distorted, as if she were seeing through frosted glass. "Laura!" a familiar voice called. It was Richard running toward her. She tried to take a step forward, but her legs gave way. Richard caught her before she fell, immediately noticing the symptoms. "You're burning with fever," he said, picking her up in his arms. "And your pulse is very irregular." "The antidote," she murmured, clutching her bag. "I need my father." "We'll take care of both of you," he promised, carrying her inside. In the room, Alexander woke up startled. Emily was by his side in an instant. "Laura," he said, agitated, "something's wrong." As if responding to his premonition, Richard entered the room carrying Laura. Her face was pale and her lips had a worrying bluish tint. "My daughter!" Alexander tried to get up, but Emily restrained him. "Put her here," Emily instructed Richard, indicating the second bed that had been prepared. Her hands trembled as she checked her daughter's vital signs. "The antidote," Laura whispered, extending the bag to her mother. At that moment, Charles Winters entered the room accompanied by a middle-aged woman with graying hair, Dr. Sarah Martinez. "Quick," Sarah said, taking the vial and examining it. "We need to administer the antidote simultaneously to both. Timing is crucial. Emily." And Richard worked in perfect sync, preparing the necessary equipment. Sarah explained the procedure, her calm and professional voice contrasting with the tension in the room. "The antidote will neutralize the chip gradually," she explained, "but the process can be intense." Alexander managed to reach Laura's hand through the space between the beds. Father and daughter looked at each other, years of absence and restrained love expressed in a single look. "Together?" he asked softly. Laura squeezed his hand, a small smile on her pale lips. "Together." Sarah inserted the antidote into both IVs. For a moment, the room fell into complete silence, just the sound of the cardiac monitors marking time like a metronome of hope. The blue-silver liquid flowed slowly through the IV tubes, subtly glowing under the hospital lights. Emily observed the monitors with obsessive attention, her years of medical experience fighting against her maternal instinct. The first signs of reaction to the antidote began a few minutes later. Alexander's body tensed, his fingers squeezing Laura's hand tightly. She, in turn, began to tremble more intensely. "It's normal," Sarah assured, checking both of their vital signs. "The antidote is starting to interact with the chip." "The heartbeats are accelerating," Richard alerted, looking at the monitors. Emily moved between the two beds, divided between the role of doctor and that of mother and something else, something she had never really stopped being, the woman who loved Alexander Morgan. "Emily," Alexander called, his voice broken by pain. "If something happens—" "No," she interrupted him firmly. "Don't you dare say goodbye." Laura let out a low moan, and Emily immediately turned to her. Her daughter was pale, drops of cold sweat on her forehead. "Mom," she whispered, "it's burning." "The antidote is neutralizing the chip," Sarah explained, administering something to Laura's IV. "The burning sensation is expected. It means it's working." Charles observed everything from the door, his normally impassive face revealing concern. Jessica had just arrived, bringing more news from the board. "Victor called an extraordinary meeting for tomorrow," she informed quietly. "They're going to vote on the company's future." "The future of the company is the least of my concerns right now," Charles replied, not taking his eyes off the two beds. The minutes dragged like hours. The room was immersed in a dense atmosphere of hope and fear. The monitors continued their rhythmic chant, marking each beat, each moment of struggle. "The neural patterns are stabilizing," Sarah announced after what seemed like an eternity. "In both." Emily checked the numbers, feeling a slight tremor of relief. "The heart rate is normalizing too." Alexander slowly opened his eyes as if waking from a long dream. "Laura?" he immediately called. "I'm here, Dad," she replied, her voice stronger now. Emily felt tears streaming down her face as she saw color gradually returning to her daughter's cheeks. Richard gently squeezed her shoulder, a gesture of silent support. "The tremors," Alexander noticed, moving his hands. "They've stopped." Sarah smiled, satisfied. "The antidote is doing exactly what it should. It will take a few hours to completely neutralize the chip, but the worst is over." Laura managed to sit up in bed, still holding her father's hand. Emily approached, sitting between the two beds, her hands naturally finding theirs. "Thank you," Alexander said softly, looking at everyone in the room, "for not giving up." "Family doesn't give up," Laura replied simply. Jessica discreetly cleared her throat. "Alexander, about the board meeting." "Tomorrow," he gently interrupted her. "Today I just want to be here, with my family." The sun was beginning to rise, painting the New York sky with shades of pink and gold. It was a new day, a new beginning. In room 501, a family torn apart by ambition and secrets finally reunited, healed not just by the antidote in their veins, but by the love that had survived 2 decades of separation. Richard observed the scene with a mixture of emotions. His gaze met Emily's, and he saw in them something he had already expected, a silent request for forgiveness, a gentle goodbye. He nodded slightly, understanding. Sometimes love is not about possessing, but about letting go. Sarah and Charles discreetly left the room, followed by Jessica. Only the 4 remained: Emily, Alexander, Laura, and Richard, the past, the present, and all the possibilities of the future converging in a single moment of peace. A week after the administration of the antidote, the main auditorium of Biotech Solutions was packed. Journalists, executives, and employees crowded in, anxiously awaiting Alexander Morgan's official pronouncement. In the improvised green room, Laura adjusted her father's tie, a gesture so natural it seemed they had done this throughout their lives. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, stepping back to admire her work. Alexander smiled, touching the necklace she now wore. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life." Emily entered the green room carrying a folder with the latest test results. "All ready?" "Almost," Alexander replied, taking her hand and kissing it softly. The gesture, so intimate and natural, still made Emily's heart race. In the past week, while recovering in the hospital, much had changed. Richard had accepted an offer to lead a research project in Boston, a decision that, though painful, seemed right for everyone involved. Emily and Alexander had rediscovered not only their love, but a new form of partnership, more mature and conscious. "The board is nervous," Jessica informed, entering the green room. "Victor didn't show up." "He wouldn't anyway," Alexander said, adjusting his suit. "Not after the forced resignation." Laura checked her tablet where the cardiac monitor project was open. In recent nights while recovering, she and her father had worked together, refining the design and expanding its possibilities. It was impressive how their minds worked in sync, complementing each other perfectly. "It's time," Emily announced, softly. Alexander took a deep breath, looking at his reunited family. "Shall we change the world?" "Again," Laura smiled, "but this time the right way." The auditorium fell silent when Alexander took the stage, followed by Laura. Emily and Jessica took their places in the front row, along with Charles and Sarah. "Good morning," Alexander began, his voice strong and clear. 20 years ago, when I founded Biotech Solutions, I had a dream, to use technology to improve people's lives. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what really mattered." He paused, his eyes finding Emily's in the audience. Project Kronos was a mistake. Not because the technology was flawed, but because it was developed with the wrong purpose. We sought power, control, dominion over our own mortality, and in the process, we almost lost our humanity. Laura stepped forward, and the camera flashes fired frenetically. The story of Alexander Morgan's secret daughter had already leaked to the press, generating a media frenzy. "Today, I announced not only my withdrawal from the CEO position," Alexander continued, "but also the complete restructuring of Biotech Solutions. Under the new leadership of Laura Hayes Morgan and a renewed board, we will redirect our resources and technology toward projects that truly make a difference." On the screen behind them, the presentation of the cardiac monitor developed by Laura appeared along with projections of its impact on underserved communities. "This is just the first of many projects." Laura took the floor, her presence on stage as natural as her father's. "Biotech has always been synonymous with innovation. Now it will also be synonymous with humanity." Charles smiled discreetly, proud. He had been one of the first to support the transition, convincing a large part of the board to accept the changes. "Technology has the power to transform lives," Alexander resumed, "but I learned the hard way that this power needs to be guided by something greater than ambition. It needs to be guided by love." His eyes found Laura's, then Emily's. There was his true legacy, not the corporate empire he had built, but the family he had almost lost. "The future of biotech," he continued, his voice laden with emotion, "is in the hands of someone who represents everything this company should have been from the beginning. Someone who inherited not just my name, but her mother's heart and a vision of the world that took me decades to understand." Laura took her father's hand, and together they faced the flashes and cameras. Father and daughter, past and future, united not just by blood, but by a common purpose. At the back of the auditorium, Sarah observed everything with satisfaction. The antidote had worked perfectly, not only healing the physical damage, but apparently catalyzing a much deeper healing, that of a family, a company, and perhaps an entire legacy. The press conference that followed the announcement was intense. Journalists jostled, trying to get more details about the story that was already being called the biggest turnaround in the American corporate world. Laura handled the responses with a natural elegance that surprised even Alexander. Emily proudly watched as her daughter explained the technical aspects of the cardiac monitor and the company's new ethical guidelines. "Miss Hayes Morgan," a journalist called, "what was it like to discover you were Alexander Morgan's daughter?" Laura smiled, instinctively touching the necklace. "I always knew. The real discovery was realizing that sometimes we need to lose something to understand its true value. My father built an empire, but now we're building something much more valuable, a legacy of real change." After the press conference, the Pum family gathered in Alexander's old office, now Laura's office. The view of the city seemed different now, less imposing and more welcoming. "I still can't believe you're really going to retire," Emily teased, serving coffee for everyone. Alexander laughed, embracing her from behind. "It's not retirement, it's reallocation of priorities." "Which begins with a wedding," Laura commented casually, pretending to examine some papers. Emily almost dropped the cup. "How did you—" "The ring in his pocket," Laura pointed to her father's jacket. "Not very discreet, checking the box all the time." Alexander blushed slightly, something Laura had never imagined seeing. Reaching into his pocket, he removed a small blue velvet box. "This isn't how I had planned it," he murmured, looking at Emily, "but I think our family has had enough formality." Kneeling, he opened the box, revealing a delicate ring with a single diamond. "Emily Hayes, you gave me the greatest gift anyone could receive, our daughter. You gave me a second chance when I least deserved it. Would you now give me the honor of spending the rest of our lives trying to make up for lost time?" Laura discreetly filmed with her phone, silent tears streaming down her face as she watched her mother, always so strong, so controlled, crumble into tears of happiness. "Yes," Emily whispered, pulling Alexander into a kiss. Jessica knocked on the door at this moment, pausing in surprise at the scene. "Oh, excuse me, but I thought you'd like to know. The first batch of cardiac monitors has just been approved for clinical trials." Laura hugged her parents, who were still entwined. "I think we have a lot to celebrate." "Actually," Jessica continued, a small smile on her lips, "there's more. The Gates Foundation has expressed interest in the project. They want to discuss a global distribution partnership." Alexander looked at his daughter with pride. In just 1 week, she had transformed his technology empire into something he never achieved in 20 years, a real force for change. "You're amazing," he said simply. "I had good genes," she replied, winking. "From both sides." Emily wiped away the tears, looking at the ring on her finger. "So when will the wedding be?" "In the garden of the new headquarters," Laura promptly replied. "I've already reserved it for next month." "How did you know?" Alexander began. "Dad," she laughed, "I'm your daughter. Strategic planning is in my blood." The afternoon sun streamed through the office windows, bathing the family in a golden light. On the walls, the old photos of corporate achievements had been replaced by new dreams, humanitarian projects, innovative research, real smiles of people impacted by technology. Jessica observed from the door, her heart light for the first time in 15 years. The secrets she had kept for so long had finally transformed into liberating truths. Guilt had given way to redemption. "Jessica," Laura called, "you're part of this family now too. Come celebrate with us." And there, on the 50th floor of a reformed empire, 4 people toasted not just to an engagement or an approved project, but to something much greater, the chance to rewrite their stories together. The new Biotech Solutions campus had been inaugurated just a month ago, and it had already become a symbol of transformation in the city. Unlike the old glass and steel tower, the complex was surrounded by green areas and open spaces. In the center of the main garden, a young tree was growing, planted by Alexander, Emily, and Laura on the day of the inauguration. It was Saturday morning, and the gardens were especially beautiful, decorated for the wedding that would take place in a few hours. Laura supervised the final details, her tablet always in hand, alternating between checks of the decoration and analyses of the latest results from the clinical trials of the cardiac monitors. "You need to rest a bit," Charles commented, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. Laura gratefully accepted the drink. "We still have to finalize the altar arrangements, check the sound system, and the double-blind test results arrived this morning." "And all of that can wait a few hours," he gently interrupted her. "Today is your parents' wedding." She smiled, allowing herself to relax a little. The past months had been intense, the restructuring of the company, the development of new projects, adaptation to her new position as CEO. But each challenge had been worth it. In the makeshift bridal room, in one of the campus rooms, Emily was finishing getting ready. Sarah and Jessica were helping her with the final details of the dress, an elegant model in champagne tones that perfectly matched her personality. "Nervous?" Sarah asked, adjusting the veil. "Strangely no," Emily replied, touching the necklace. She had recovered from her drawer, the identical pair to the one Laura wore. "So I spent so much time trying to bury the past, and now you're building a future," Jessica completed, her eyes welling up. "Emily, I never really forgave myself for—" "We've talked about this," Emily gently interrupted her. "The past is in the past. Look what we've built from it." In another room, Alexander adjusted his navy blue suit, his hands slightly trembling, not from the effects of the chip, now completely neutralized, but from the emotion of the moment. "Need help?" Laura asked from the door. "Your mother was—" "Always better with ties," he admitted, smiling. Laura approached, beginning to adjust the knot with the same delicacy she had inherited from Emily. "You know, I spent years imagining what it would be like to have you around. I dreamed of moments like this." Alexander held his daughter's hands, interrupting her work with the tie. "Do you forgive me for all the moments I missed?" "Dad," she smiled, tears glistening in her eyes, "we're not missing any more moments. That's what matters." In the garden, guests began to arrive. The ceremony would be small, just family and close friends. Among them, faces that had been part of the journey of healing and transformation. The hospital medical team, biotech researchers, representatives of communities benefiting from the company's new projects. Richard was also there, having returned from Boston especially for the occasion. His smile was genuine when he greeted Laura. Time and distance had transformed the pain into a mature and true friendship. The music began to play softly, and the guests took their places. The altar had been set up near the young tree, a perfect symbol of new beginnings and deep roots. Laura walked first down the improvised aisle between the chairs, her light blue dress fluttering slightly in the morning breeze. Upon reaching the altar, she turned to see her parents walking together, breaking tradition as they had broken so many other rules to be there. Emily and Alexander advanced hand in hand, their smiles illuminating the garden more than the morning sun. They weren't just a bride and groom walking to their wedding. They were two people who had traversed decades of separation, pain and transformation to rediscover a love that had never really died. When they reached the altar, Alexander kissed Emily's hand before letting go. The officiant began the ceremony, but for Laura, watching her parents, the words were just background music. What mattered was in the exchanged glances, the complicit smiles, the small demonstrations of a love that had survived time and silence. The breeze gently stirred the branches of the young tree, making some newly opened flowers dance over the couple. It was as if nature itself was celebrating this moment of renewal and hope. The wedding reception was taking place in the grand event hall of the new campus, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of the gardens illuminated by the afternoon sun. Guests circulated among tables decorated with simple arrangements of white flowers, the atmosphere vibrating with animated conversations and sincere laughter. Laura was sitting with Charles and Sarah, discussing the latest results from the cardiac monitors' clinical trials. Even on a day of celebration, her mind remained partially focused on the work that had become her passion. "The numbers are impressive," Sarah commented, analyzing the graphs on her tablet. "The success rate is much higher than expected, and the production costs are low enough to make the project viable on a large scale," Charles added. "The Gates Foundation has already confirmed funding for the first phase of global distribution." Laura smiled, watching her parents dancing in the center of the hall. "You know what's most incredible? Seeing how technology can really change lives when used with the right purpose." The soft music cradled Emily and Alexander in their first dance as a couple. Their movements were natural, as if they had danced together every day for the last 20 years, and not just in their memories. "Remember, the last time we danced?" Alexander asked softly. Emily rested her head on his shoulder. "On our last night together, you had just given me the necklace." "I promised I'd come back," he whispered. "I took a while, but I kept my promise." "It was worth the wait," she replied, lifting her face to kiss him. Jessica, sitting at a nearby table with some company executives, observed the scene with a serene smile. The guilt she had carried for so many years had transformed into a renewed purpose. As the new director of social responsibility at the reformed biotech, she now used her talent for organization to ensure the company's humanitarian projects reached those who really needed them. Richard approached Laura, offering a glass of champagne. "Your mother is radiant." "They both are," she replied, accepting the drink. "How's Boston?" "Different, challenging, exactly what I needed," he smiled. "And you?" How is it commanding an empire? Laura laughed. Less about command and more about transformation. Each day I learn something new, about business, about people, about myself. The music changed, and Alexander walked to his daughter, extending his hand in a silent invitation to dance. Laura handed her glass to Richard and accepted the invitation, letting herself be guided by her father to the dance floor. "You know what makes me most proud?" Alexander asked as they danced. "Seeing how you transformed my mistakes into lessons, my failures into opportunities to do something better." "I had good examples," she replied. "Mum taught me about strength and integrity, and you, even while absent, taught me about persistence and vision." Emily watched them, her heart overflowing with love. Jessica approached, handing her an envelope. "What's this?" "Open it," Jessica smiled. Inside the envelope, Emily found one of the old letters she had written to Alexander, the one where she told him about her pregnancy. Along with it, there was a current note. "Dear Emily, some promises take time to be fulfilled, but true love always finds its way. Thank you for not giving up. With love, Alexander." Tears blurred her vision as she watched her husband and daughter dancing. They had come a long way, from secrets and pain to a story of redemption and unconditional love. In the garden, the young tree swayed gently with the afternoon breeze, its flowers perfuming the air. Like that tree, the Hayes Morgan family had created deep roots, growing toward the sun even after the storm. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. Laura had rejoined her mother, and now they watched Alexander animatedly discussing new projects with Charles. "He's changed so much," Emily commented. "We've all changed," Laura replied, squeezing her mother's hand, "and we'll continue to change. Grow, evolve." The necklace on her neck gleamed in the evening light, no longer a symbol of broken promises, but a reminder that love, when true, always finds its way back home. 6 months after the wedding, the cardiac monitor project had transformed into a global success. Laura was in a community in rural Appalachia, personally supervising the installation of the first health unit fully equipped with the new biotech technology. The small health post, previously precarious, was now equipped with monitors that allowed state-of-the-art cardiac monitoring at affordable costs. On the walls, educational posters explained the technology's functioning in simple and clear language. "It's amazing to see this working," Emily commented, adjusting one of the devices. She had insisted on personally participating in the training of the local medical team. Laura observed a girl of about 10 being examined. The monitor showed her heartbeats on a colorful and friendly display, specially developed to make children more comfortable during exams. "When we created the project," Laura said, "I never imagined it would go so far so fast." "Your vision was always bigger than mine," Alexander replied, entering the room. He had just arrived from New York, where he had participated in a meeting with new social investors. The girl being examined looked curiously at the three of them, while the local nurse explained the procedure. Her smile upon seeing her own heart beating on the screen was living proof of the impact they were having. "The results from the last quarter arrived," Alexander continued, showing his tablet. "The program has already benefited more than 10,000 people across the United States. And this is just the beginning," Laura smiled, her eyes shining with the same determination she had inherited from her parents. "The Gates Foundation wants to expand the project to Africa and Asia next year." Emily finished training the local team and joined the family. Observing the three together, it was impossible not to notice how they complemented each other. Alexander's experience and strategic vision, Emily's medical knowledge and compassion, Laura's innovation and determination. "Dr. Laura," called one of the local nurses, "there's a family wanting to thank you personally. Their son was diagnosed with a heart condition thanks to the monitor, and now he's receiving proper treatment." Laura followed the nurse to the waiting room, where a simple family waited. The father, a farmer with calloused hands, shook her hand firmly. "You're an angel," he said, emotional. "If it weren't for this device, my boy." "It was a team effort," Laura replied. looking at her parents who were watching from the door. Sometimes we need to lose something precious to understand how we can make a difference in others' lives. Bakui. In New York, days later, an important meeting was taking place in Laura's new office. Charles and Sarah were presenting the results of the latest research on the neural chip. "We've managed to identify all the prototype users," Sarah explained, showing a list. "Thanks to the antidote, no severe cases were reported. And most importantly," Charles added, "we've developed a much more rigorous safety protocol for future biotechnology projects." Jessica entered the room carrying more reports. As Social Responsibility Director, she had completely transformed the way the company handled its humanitarian projects. "The board unanimously approved the new ethics code," she announced, "and the Transparency Committee is working perfectly." Laura smiled, looking out the window at the tree in the garden, now stronger and more leafy. Like that tree, the legacy they were building created deep roots and branches that extended far beyond their initial expectations. "Dad," she called, turning to Alexander, who was analyzing some documents, "remember when you said you wanted to change the world with technology?" He looked up, smiling. "I remember. But now I understand that it's not technology that changes the world. It's the people behind it." Emily, who had just arrived from a visit to another medical center, completed, "and the purpose with which it's used." The family gathered by the window, observing the movement at the company's new headquarters. Employees walked through the gardens. During their break, groups of researchers discussed projects in common areas, and a school of underprivileged children visited the newly inaugurated Social Technology Center. "You know what's most incredible?" Laura commented, touching her necklace. "How a simple cardiac monitor project brought us here." "It wasn't the project," Emily gently corrected. "It was love. Love that survived time, distance, secrets. Love that made us want to be better people." Alexander embraced the two women of his life, feeling a deep gratitude for this second chance. The empire he had built was no longer made just of glass and steel. It was built on foundations of compassion, purpose, and, most importantly, love. The auditorium of New York University was packed for the graduation of the first class of the Humanitarian Medical Technology Residency Program, a partnership between the institution and Biotech Solutions. Laura, as class patron, adjusted her speech one last time before going on stage. In the front row, Emily and Alexander watched with pride. A year had passed since the wedding, and the changes were visible not only in the company, but in their personal lives. Alexander had found a new passion mentoring young social entrepreneurs, while Emily divided her time between the hospital and coordinating biotech's community health programs. "Good evening," Laura began, her voice firm and warm, echoing through the auditorium. "When I was asked to be the patron of this class, I thought a lot about what to share with you. I could talk about technology, innovation, the market, but today I want to talk about something more fundamental, the power of reconnection." Her eyes found her parents in the audience, and a soft smile appeared on her lips. "Just over a year ago, I was just a young doctor with an ambitious project and many doubts. Today, I stand before you not just as CEO of a technology company, but as someone who has learned that the greatest innovation we can create is the one that reconnects us with our humanity." In the audience, Richard, who had returned from Boston to participate in the ceremony, smiled, proud of the strong and determined woman Laura had become. Next to him, Charles and Sarah exchanged knowing looks, remembering the journey that had brought them here. "Each of you," Laura continued, "is about to enter a world that desperately needs bridges between technology and compassion. You are those bridges. Each line of code you write, each device you develop, each innovation you create, may it be with the purpose of reconnecting people, of healing not just bodies, but souls." Jessica, sitting a few rows behind, discreetly wiped away a tear. Her own journey of redemption had inspired a new policy in the company, one of second chances and personal transformation. "When we developed the low-cost cardiac monitor," Laura continued, "we didn't imagine we were creating much more than a medical device. We created a movement for change, an example of how technology can and should be accessible to all. The images on the screen showed the project's results: remote communities receiving care, children being diagnosed early, lives being transformed. But it also showed something more subtle: smiles, hugs, looks of gratitude, the human dimension that no financial report could capture. But the greatest lesson I learned, she continued, her voice softening, came from my own story. I learned that sometimes we need to lose ourselves to find ourselves, that the greatest technological advances mean nothing if they aren't in service of love. Emily squeezed Alexander's hand, both moved by their daughter's words. The necklace on her neck, identical to the one Laura wore, shone under the auditorium lights, a silent symbol of fulfilled promises and restored loves. Therefore, my dear graduates, my advice to you is simple. Never let the pursuit of innovation overshadow your humanity. Use your knowledge not just to create technology, but to build bridges. Not just to develop devices, but to touch hearts. In the last row of the auditorium, a group of rural doctors watched the ceremony via video conference, part of the telemedicine program Laura had implemented. Among them was that first family they had helped in Appalachia, now part of a growing network of project multipliers. And always remember, the true power of technology isn't in circuits or algorithms, but in the ability to reconnect people, to restore bonds, to heal old wounds. It's in the possibility of transforming mistakes into learning, absences into presences, silences into dialogues. Laura touched her own necklace, a gesture that had become almost instinctive when she spoke about transformation and hope. You are more than engineers, doctors, or programmers. You are guardians of a new way of thinking about technology and health. You are protagonists of a story that's just beginning. The audience applauded standing, moved not just by the words, but by the living example of transformation that Laura represented. There was a woman who had transformed pain into purpose, absence into presence, technology into humanity. 5 years had passed since that first crisis in the hospital. The garden at Biotech Solutions was especially beautiful on that spring morning, the tree planted on the wedding day now majestic and flowering, its roots as deep as the bonds that united the Hayes-Morgan family. Laura walked slowly along the garden paths, one hand resting on her 7-month pregnant belly. At her side, Emily admired the newly opened flowers, while Alexander photographed each moment with the same enthusiasm as a first-time father, which, technically, he was about to become again, now as a grandfather. "It's a girl," Laura had announced months earlier during a family dinner, "and we'll call her Sophie." The name had been carefully chosen. Sophie, wisdom in Greek, represented everything that family had learned throughout their journey of reconnection and love. "The latest results arrived," Laura commented, sitting on one of the garden benches. "The program has already served more than 1 million people in 15 countries. And to think it all started with a cardiac monitor," Emily smiled, sitting beside her daughter. Alexander lowered the camera, his gaze lost in memories. "Actually, it started with a letter that never reached its destination." The comment made Laura instinctively touch the necklace on her neck, the same one that would now be passed on to her daughter, carrying not just the story of her parents' love but also the promise of a new beginning. Jessica approached the group, carrying a folder with the latest social impact reports. In recent years, she had become more than an employee. She was an indispensable part of the family. "The Global Council for Social Innovation just released the annual ranking," she announced, barely containing her smile. Biotech was named the most innovative company in social technology for the 3rd consecutive year. But it wasn't just the company that had transformed. Each person in that garden carried the marks of a profound change. Alexander, once obsessed with power and control, had discovered that his true strength lay in his ability to inspire and guide others. His mentoring program for young social entrepreneurs had become a world reference. Emily masterfully balanced her medical career with the company's social projects, proving that it's never too late to bring together different passions for a greater purpose. "Dr. Charles is arriving," Jessica informed, checking her phone. He wants to show the results of the new research on neural regeneration. Laura smiled, remembering how the old neural chip, which had almost destroyed her family, had transformed into the basis for new discoveries, this time developed with ethics and responsibility. "You know what's most incredible?" she asked, watching a group of students visiting the research center. "How each challenge we faced brought us exactly where we needed to be." Emily took her daughter's hand, feeling the baby kick softly. "Sophie will be born into a world very different from the one we knew. A world we helped transform," Alexander completed, sitting on the other side of Laura. The morning sun bathed the garden in a golden light, making the flowers of the century-old tree shine like small stars. A gentle breeze carried promises of spring and new beginnings. "Next week we inaugurate the 10th health unit in Appalachia," Laura commented, caressing her belly. "I want Sophie to grow up understanding the true meaning of legacy." "She will understand," Emily assured, "just as you understood, even when everything seemed lost." Alexander took another photo of the moment, his family gathered under the tree that symbolized so much in their history. The camera's click captured more than an image. It registered a moment of perfect harmony between past, present, and future. "Is the monitor recording the baby's heartbeats?" he asked, noticing the small device on Laura's wrist. "A miniaturized version of the original project." "Always," Laura smiled. "And you want to know something interesting? Her heartbeats synchronize with mine when we're in the garden, especially near this tree." Emily, the ever-present doctor, took out her tablet to verify the data. It was true, the graphs showed a synchronized dance between mother and daughter, a cardiac duet that seemed cradled by nature itself. "It's as if she already knew," Jessica commented softly, "that she's coming to a family where each heartbeat tells a story of love." And under the tree they had planted together, surrounded by flowers that symbolized renewal, the Hayes-Morgan family celebrated not just the achievements of the past or the promises of the future, but the certainty that love, when true, has the power to transform not just hearts but entire generations. The maternity ward of St. Luke's Hospital was buzzing on that sunny September morning. Sophie Hayes-Morgan had arrived in the world during the early hours, bringing with her the promise of a new generation. Laura rested in bed, exhausted but radiant, while Emily adjusted the small cardiac monitor on her granddaughter's wrist, the same model that had saved thousands of lives around the world. Alexander couldn't contain the tears as he held his granddaughter for the first time, recognizing in her the same determined eyes as Laura. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the tiny fingers that gripped his with surprising strength. Jessica entered the room silently, carrying a small package wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was the necklace, the same one that had connected 3 generations of love now ready to be passed on. "It's a tradition now," Laura smiled, watching her mother carefully place the necklace in a small music box beside the crib. "Each woman in the Hayes-Morgan family carries a piece of this story." The room was decorated with flowers from the biotech garden, some picked from the very tree they had planted years before. The soft aroma filled the room, mixing with the characteristic smell of new beginnings. "You know what's most extraordinary?" Emily commented, observing Sophie's heartbeats on the monitor. "How the technology that almost separated us ended up being the instrument that brought us back together." Alexander approached the window, observing the city that stretched beyond the hospital. Somewhere out there, thousands of cardiac monitors developed by his daughter continued saving lives, connecting people, transforming realities. "It wasn't the technology," he replied softly. "It was love. Technology was just the path that love chose to reconnect us." Laura adjusted Sophie in her arms, marveling at each small movement, each sigh. "And now we have a new guardian of this story." Charles and Sarah, who had just arrived for a quick visit, brought more than gifts. They brought news that perfectly completed that moment of celebration. "The UN just approved the global program," Charles announced, barely containing his enthusiasm. "The cardiac monitor project will be implemented in all developing countries over the next 5 years." Sarah added, "And the best part, using the social technology model you developed, each unit will be a center not just of health, but of community, Transformation. Laura smiled, gently cradling Sophie. Did you hear that, little one? You were just born into a family that believes each heartbeat tells a story, and each story has the power to change the world. Emily and Alexander approached, the bed forming a protective circle around Laura and Sophie. Jessica discreetly photographed each moment, knowing these images would one day be part of the company's memorial, not as a corporate record, but as a testament to how love can transform a technology empire into a legacy of humanity. You know what moves me the most, Alexander commented, watching Sophie fall asleep in her daughter's arms. How each choice we made, each mistake we committed, each moment of pain and redemption brought us exactly to this instant. The morning sun came through the window, bathing the family in a golden light. On the small cardiac monitor, Sophie's heartbeats formed a gentle and constant rhythm, the music of a new life, the promise of a future where technology and love dance in perfect harmony. And this is just the first page of her story, Laura whispered, gently kissing her daughter's forehead. Emily adjusted the necklace in the music box, which began to play a soft melody. A story that began with an undelivered letter, an interrupted love, a neural chip, and a cardiac monitor. And that continues, Alexander completed, with each heartbeat, each smile, each moment of true connection. Sophie moved softly in her sleep, her small hand finding the necklace that was now hers. The sun reflected on the metal, creating small rainbows that danced on the room's walls, as if the universe itself was celebrating this moment of renewal and hope. And so, under the light of a new day, cradled by the love of 3 generations, and by the soft beep of the cardiac monitor,